Suzana, thank you for being here with us. It is a pleasure. We know that you are touring around the U.S. and we wanted to ask a couple questions to help not only ourselves but our viewers who are watching. This idea of Jesus, for us as Spiritists, has a different connotation, has a different meaning altogether. But for you, as someone who is an avid speaker giving lectures throughout the U.S., how do you reconcile the image of Christ or Jesus to the American public versus the Jesus that we know? And how do you sort of reconcile with that? And what is your experience with that?
Yeah, I think what we do when we are doing our lectures and talking about Jesus is really to introduce to the American public, I think, a very different idea of what Jesus actually means to us in Spiritism. So one of the explanations or definitions that I like the most, it's found in the book Among Brothers of Other Lands, where Christ there is defined not as the outer Savior, but the inner Savior. So
not the outer Savior, inner Savior.
Inner Savior.
Oh, okay.
And so he's not someone who's going to come from the outside with his powers to save us, but he's a reference. Not he, the man, but he, the life, the teachings, is a reference for us to do our inner work. So he's a reference. Who saves us is not an outside person and an outside force, but it is our commitment to follow the principles and the examples that were set by him as a more evolved brother, as a more evolved spirit, something that we all aspire to become one day. We all aspire to become Christ one day. So I really like this definition, that he's not like this savior that comes from the outside, but just a reference for us. So we are seeking enlightenment, we're seeking to evolve. So who is the reference? Who is the highest reference that we have? So he is. So if we follow his teachings, if we follow his examples, we'll find the peace in the kingdom of heaven that he proposed when he was with us.
Thank you, that's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
In a materialistic society that we live in, and of course, no matter who you are, no matter what religion you're from, you're dealing with the material world, you're dealing with physicality, physical things, and social media, and what images are putting out there. So what are some tips you have, or whether you use them personally or you share them with your public or with family and friends, what are some tips you can share to sort of help manage the idea of being in the world but not of the world?
Actually, that is the first slide of a lecture that I will be doing today at the Spirit Society of Baltimore. And there is a quote by Pastorino where he says that, and I'm not going to remember the quote exactly, but the idea behind the quote is that we need to be in a world of material things in order to learn to dematerialize. A world of things that are permanent in order to know what is not permanent. And my idea, what I really like to think about the purpose of life here in this material realm is that the spirit needs to dive into matter in order to find its essence, which is immaterial. So with all that being said, I think that matter is an instrument, right? And so we need to have this material existence. We need to be into the material in order to learn what is essential to us. So let's take our physical bodies, right? So it's something that is, it's not permanent. So the fact that it ages and the fact that it deteriorates, it forces us to learn that we are not our physical bodies. So if we are not our physical bodies, so what are we? Right. So we are more than that, right? So I think that, but that that I'm telling you in such a cognitive way is a daily challenge. It's the very reason why we're here. We're here to learn about the essence of who we are, to learn about what is really important, what is really essential for our happiness. And matter is the instrument that allows us to have the experiences and the bridges and takes us to the places that we need to be. That being said, it's something that, it becomes a daily practice, right? So I have no authority to be saying, how people should or should not be dealing with aging, for example, because it is a very difficult situation, because for us, in our level of evolution, in where we are, we identify very, very deeply with anything and everything that is material. So much so that our sense of worth is very much tied in with the material. And so Brené Brown, she likes to talk that we live in a society that is characterized by a sense of scarcity. We don't have enough. We don't feel like we are enough. We're not intelligent enough. We're not tall enough. We're not skinny enough. We're not talented enough. We are not extraordinary, because she says it's not enough to be ordinary people. Everybody must be extraordinary to have a sense that you're actually worth it. And so it's a challenge, but I think that the fact that matter is not a permanent thing and transformation is part of our life is precisely what helps us to learn about what is, truly essential in life. So it's an exercise that I'm doing. I'm on this boat, every day, trying to put in practice, just to be aware and conscious. You are worth it for nothing that you do. The moment that God created you out of love and said, you are divine, my divine child, that's where your worth is, just because you are. You don't need to do anything to be worthy of love. You just are.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The subject of sexuality and one's sexuality, recently I heard something from Dr. Alberto Almeida giving a lecture about how even when we say the word breast or penis, it seems like it's a dirty word. So we have over time and through the ages sort of made such topics so taboo and to seem dirty that even ourselves, we view the whole issue of sexuality as something dirty and secret. And so it creates so many issues within every man and women. It creates so many issues of like, oh no, that's wrong. Or so how do you not only reconcile the issue of sexuality, but sexuality from different types, whether it's bisexuality, homosexuality, from a religious, spiritist, or non-religious perspective, and what tips could you give to the younger generation that are growing up now, that are luckily enough, where it's becoming less and less taboo, yet there still are a lot of taboos. There's still a lot of criticism, especially from the religious arena. It probably is the most sometimes harsh because of just biblical reasons or old beliefs, atavistic ideas, old beliefs. So what tips could you give to people that are growing up now in the LGBT community, or just heterosexuals that are scared of their own selves?
Yeah. It's not like a quick solution, because as you said, in Spiritism, one of the main principles is reincarnation. So we believe that we have been living and reincarnating for a long period of time. So today we are here and we are heirs of our own past. And so all the belief system that we lived in, religion throughout time, and all the taboos around sexuality, they remain in us, So how can I speak differently to my children if I don't work in myself in first place, those taboos, and, seek to look at it from a different light? So I think we all have some of that, more or less, because again, our history as immortal spirits and where we have been, And what we know today is that we are immortal spirits, and it really, the most important thing in our lives, and what I believe God is really, really, if you would say that God is concerned about anything, we don't think that God is truly concerned, okay? But just for the sake of what we are talking about. So let's say if God would be concerned with anything, it would be that we are learning to love, okay? And so I don't think it really matters, who are we loving, because the ultimate purpose of our lives is to learn to love one another as brothers and sisters, all right? So we are born in different genders, with different sexual attractions, with different perceptions and possibilities. The possibilities are pretty infinite in the realm of sexuality. But the most important thing is that we learn to dignify our relationships, to respect one another, and to love one another. So the sexual part of it, the physical part of it, will always be a consequence of this experience. And so it's just the physical manifestation of this law. That's a divine law, the law of love. So in Spiritism, we believe that the sexual interchange has two primary functions. One is the function of reproduction, but we also know that it's a function that nurtures the soul. When you are intimate with someone, there is a very intense exchange of energies that is important for the sustenance of the couple and for the well-being, physical, emotional well-being. So I think it's important for us to continue to cultivate this different view of sexuality as something that's beautiful, as something that is divine, as something that is not dirty, but it will take some time for us to deal with it a little bit more naturally. So I'll tell you a little story. So we have 2 kids right now, my partner and I, and they are 6 and 7. And they're kids, so they're in a natural phase of curiosity and touching themselves and having fun, discovering things. And so sometimes they will be doing that, just like anywhere in the house, kind of playing and so we'll tell them, that feels good, right? Because it does, right? It feels good, right? But you know what? That's something you do in private. So if you want to do that, you don't do it in front of everybody. That's a private thing you do on your own. So when you're in your room, you can explore your body, And so that would be like, it is a natural thing, right? It's part of being human in a physical body, the sensations, the pleasure. We don't need to make it dirty, secretive, or instill guilt in the kids because they are doing a very natural thing, which is exploring their own body, getting to know their own physiology. It's a natural thing. But most people would what? Don't do this, right? It's not good. Don't ever do that again. So the kid starts like, what's wrong? What's wrong with that? And there's ultimately nothing wrong.
That's beautiful. Recently, I heard, or we watched actually, that you got together a panel. It was a whole seminar with several people talking about homosexuality under the light of Spiritism. And recently you had a coming out panel. Can you share with us about that experience, whether it's your own personal experience, but also those who share their own coming out story, what that was like?
Yeah, the panel was actually part of a seminar on sexuality, and we addressed the topics like transgender and homosexuality, sexuality in general, and it ended with this panel. The whole seminar was a project that I had for a few years in my mind, something that I wanted to do. But I had in my mind that I wanted to do something a little different than there are a lot of people talking about sexuality. from a cognitive and philosophical perspective. But I feel that it's different when you talk about something and you are on the inside.
You're living it.
Yeah, you're living it. You know, your perspective is going to be very unique. And I felt like I myself have done several lectures on homosexuality, which I'm going to open a parenthesis. What led me to do those lectures was a phone call that I received once from a young man who was raised in a Spiritist family and was gay and was undergoing depression and having a very difficult time. The parents had a difficult time understanding, and he was suffering very much. And I felt back at that time, this goes back maybe 6, 7, 8 years, that, you know, it would be important for someone to start talking more openly about the topic, and I felt that I could be a positive reference for others. So, done some work in this area, but I felt like I want to do a little bit more, you know. And so I want to create a seminar where not only we would talk about it philosophically, but also we would have something that would be a sharing of experiences, so that we could have a material that people could relate to, not from a theoretical perspective, but from an experiential perspective. And so I called a few friends here in the United States from different states, and some from Florida and from out of the country, and we were able to come together. And I also felt it would be important to educate people about the multiplicity of experiences, because for whatever reason, we have the need to place sexuality. I think because it's safer and we have a false sense of control. So we tend to put sexuality into little boxes and label them. So you were homosexual, so you fall into this category. But it really doesn't work like that, because even within, if you get a group of gay women, you're gonna find infinite experiences. Some people might think themselves as gays from the moment they were born, completely opposite to the idea of like ever being intimate with the opposite sex. Some people feel very differently. I myself had some relationships with men, very healthy, loving relationships. I was very happy in those relationships. And then when I was in my 18s, 20 years old, I had my first girlfriend. And I spent a period where I had relationship with men and women. And then finally I felt like, you know, that I was more comfortable and I felt better in relationship with women. But I'm not someone, for example, that feel like I'm completely aversive to men, because really I fall in love with the person. So it would be difficult because I'm naturally more attracted to women, but so it's a different experience than many other women. So we try to bring together a group of people that had very unique experiences, so they could talk about their unique experiences and could talk about, you know, just openly about their feelings. And it was really cool because some of them were like halfway out of the closet, but not totally out of the closet, you know. It's kind of the don't ask, don't tell type of policy. Everybody knows, but nobody talks about it, right? And I'm not saying that, you know, I'm in favor of every single person coming out of the closet. If you don't feel like, if that's not for you, then, you know, who am I to say? But I will tell you that is extremely liberating. There was a phase in my life where I would go to work, you know, every Monday. People get together to have lunch. I was in a rehab setting. Everybody's talking about what they did on the weekend with their families, with their spouses, and you were there sitting quietly because, you know, you don't feel comfortable sharing. Yeah. And it's like if you don't have a family, or you don't have a weekend, or like you don't do anything, you know. So it's just really, really nice when you can come in and just like any other person, you speak, me and my wife, me and my children, we did that, you know, just like any other person. So I think it was very cool because for some of the people who participated in the panel, ended up being actually a very, I think, a healing experience too, and you know, it was very impactful and meaningful in their lives. So it worked in many different ways, but the main thing was like I really wanted to be able to offer, whether you're spiritist or not, you know, look, I went through this, I had my struggles, you know, and today I am successful. I, you know, feel pretty healed in my internalized homophobias, in my guilt, you know, and it's possible. It's possible to have a family, it's possible to be happy, it's possible to be successful, you know, all the opportunities are there for you, and I did, and these people with me did too, so you can do that as well.
That's awesome. Suzana, you have a lot of experience within the Spiritist movement in Florida and abroad, being the president of your Spiritist Center, being the president of the Spiritist Federation of Florida. What kind of experiences either can you share with us or give tips for someone who's thinking about starting a Spiritist Center in their particular location? And what sort of updates can you give us with the Spiritist movement here in the U.S.?
All right, let's start with the second question.
Okay.
So in terms of the Spiritist movement in the U.S., I think I look at it with positive eyes. You know, I feel like despite of the natural struggles that exist, because there always exist struggles where there are people, we are moving forward, and we are doing some important work. If you just look at the last 10 years here in the U.S., we see a number of centers that have opened. We see conferences, and we see books that are being translated, the amount of material that's available in English. We also see the power of social media and, you know, all the Facebook videos and promotions that are starting to happen. I think it's still in its infancy, because I think it's still very much, everything that's being done is still very much, or in its majority, focusing on the Spiritist movement itself, kind of within the Spiritist movement. I think that we have a challenge to see how we're going to take all this outside of the Spiritist movement. But I don't have anxieties as far as that go. You know, in Florida, a lot of people approach me and say, you know, what is the Federation is doing to disseminate Spiritism for the Americans? I say, you know, we just got here. We are just starting, so we need to build a basis, and perhaps the most important part of this basis is we need to learn to work together. We have tremendous amount of talent in this country, people who are great speakers with different areas of knowledge, also with different talents such as technology or creativity or marketing. So we are seeing now a movement where people are starting to realize that if we want to take this message outside of this narrow circle of Spiritist work and take it to a different category, a different level of work, we need to join our efforts. If we are going to really work in a different world, in a world that is a better world, we need to be able to work together. And so I see the first efforts I think one of the important steps will be the creation of federations in the country, because the federations do have this role of like taking regions and bringing the centers together in a collaborative system. And then you have the the United States Federation that should be coordinating this joint effort across the country so that we can be even stronger and the message can be disseminated more effectively and rapidly. So I see the first, seeds being planted in this way. I mean, here in Maryland, I know that the centers here have started to organize themselves, and I applaud that initiative. I think it's extremely, extremely important, And so I see with good eyes. I'm a very optimistic person in general. I'm not naive. I'm not saying that we don't have some very difficult issues and challenges, but I just believe in this higher power, and I know that everything's under control. The issue is, will we take 10 years to get from point A to point B, or will it take 100 years? We're going to get to point B. If we decide to work together, we're going to make it to this point B a lot faster. That's the difference than if we keep working in isolation. Now, going to your first question, if you want to start a Spiritist Center, I would say that the most important thing is to gather people around you and invest in the relationships from the very beginning, because I'll tell you what, if you have a friend who is a very good friend of yours, who you love dearly, and tomorrow you have a problem with your friend, that journey of love that you have together, everything that you have done together, it's going to speak louder in your heart. And so in the time of the crisis, you will have the feeling and the sense that that relationship is more important than your point of view. And so because the relationship and the person is so important to you, you will be more willing and more ready to negotiate and sometimes even to lose. Because in order for relationships to withstand time, we have to learn to lose from time to time so the relationship can win. So for any person starting a Spiritist Center, I would say build the basis. And the basis is called fraternity. The basis is invest on the people. We are still very frail in our relationships and in ourselves. We need to be acknowledged. We need to be seen. We need to be valued from the outside because of the intense inner devaluation that goes on. So it's very important that we all tell each other from time to time, I really appreciate your presence. I really appreciate what you bring to this center. I don't tell you enough how thankful I am for your presence here. And so sometimes, just like in our daily relationships, we get a little careless with these small acts of politeness, of like caring, loving, so that the relationships can be nurtured. Once you have that basis, the rest will come a lot more easily. Everything else is easy. That's really the hardest part in any work that you are going to do. So I would say, whether it's a tiny little center, a big center, the Spiritist movement in the state of Maryland or in the United States is, put most of your energy investing on the relationships, and everything else will work out.
That's a fantastic answer. So, along the lines of talking about relationships, it seems as though everything is about relationships, whether it's in and out of Spiritism, at work, in your marriage, friendships that you've had over time, in our families. So if you could impart some of that knowledge, if someone said, okay, well, where do I begin? There just seems like there's so much stuff, like I have to work on, I need to do this, I have to do that, I have to work on myself. Should I see a therapist? Should I not see a therapist? where would be a starting point for someone, whether they're spiritist or not, who wants to get better at relating to other people and relationships both with themselves and others? Where could one start?
Know yourself, right? Know yourself. Emmanuel has a statement. I'm going to do a translation now, but it's basically, he says, fix in you what you dislike in me. So I think that's an awesome statement, okay? So because what I dislike in you, relationships are mirrors. So what I see in you is more often than not what I don't like in myself and I don't deal in myself. So we can use the relationships as mirrors to the things that we need to work on. I usually say on my lectures, you know, if you are in a relationship and something happens and you feel like that your heart rate went up in that moment, you are having some autonomic symptoms, you know, you're sweating, you're like, you know, you know that that's a sign. That's a sign for you to stop and to be mindful of what is going on within you. So why am I so hurt? Why am I so angry? Right? So you might say, because this person is doing this, and that. All right. But what is it, or where is it in me that this person is finding the vulnerable spot that I am reacting to? Because no one can trigger any discomfort in us unless he finds the spot, a raw spot in us that is vulnerable to the attack. So if you have two people and one person who is attacking those two people, right? So John and Mark, and the attack is the same, but their reaction is going to be completely different. So it's really not about what's coming from the outside, is what the outside is fighting in you and how you're responding to that. So if a 2-year-old kid comes and curses at me and hits me, I'm not going to be offended. I'm not going to be upset, because clearly it's a 2-year-old kid who is attacking me. But if someone attacks me, then I do respond differently, because I am at the same level of vibration. And, you know, so what we need to do is to pay attention to the ways that we are responding and the feelings. You know that a lot of people cannot name feelings. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times they will give the feelings a different name. So I went through that in my life, where if you would ask me, say, what are you feeling? I'm like, I'm so sad. But deep inside, I was really angry, you know. But because anger was such a no in my life, it's not good to feel angry, then it translates and it feels like sadness. But anger and sadness and whatever it is, those are just feelings, and feelings are neutral. Feelings are signs that will tell you something about where you are in your path, in your journey. So they're your best friends, whether we label them positive or negative. They're there to tell you something that you need to pay attention to. If you have a toothache, you go to the dentist. It tells you that there's an infection, there's something going on. Moral pain has the same purpose. It tells us there is an area in us that is morally infected and need attention.
Yeah, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I can talk forever, so I can.
No, that's awesome.